Short. Strong. Espresso English.
Fuel your day. Let's learn.
Your ukulele's collecting dust. Your sketchbook has 5 pages filled. And you just signed up for a pottery class you'll probably quit by week 4.
That is oddly specific. Are you describing me or half our listeners right now?
Honestly, both. And today's episode is about exactly that tension. Do you stick with something long enough to get really good, or do you keep switching because the next thing always looks more exciting?
This is a B1 level episode, perfect for intermediate learners. Beginners, you're welcome too. We'll keep it clear and natural throughout.
And if you stay until the end, we've got our word tour 5 expressions you'll actually use in real conversations. Words like commitment, restless, and plateau. Trust us, you'll want those.
But first, quick question, and we want a real answer. Think about your hobbies right now. Are you someone who goes deep on one thing or someone who loves trying everything?
Drop your answer in 3 seconds. Type A if you're a master one thing person. Type B if you're a try everything person. Go!
We're guessing a lot of B's out there. And honestly, there's no shame in that. But here's what's interesting.
There's this specific feeling that B people know really well. You're 3 weeks into a new hobby, you're excited, you're watching tutorials at midnight, and then suddenly it gets hard, or boring, or both.
And then you see an ad for rock climbing and you think, maybe that's my thing.
Every single time. And meanwhile, your friend has been playing guitar for 4 years and just performed at a cafe, and you feel this weird mix of admiration and something else?
Guilt? Envy? That quiet voice saying, why can't I just stick with something?
Exactly that voice. And later in this episode, we're going to dig into why some people can commit to one thing for years and why others can't, and whether that's actually a problem.
There's one idea we came across that completely reframed how we think about this. And we'll get to it. But first, let's talk about what this actually feels like from the inside.
Because if you've ever felt restless in the middle of something you used to love, this next part is for you.
Okay, so let's start with the pro mastery side. Because I'll be honest, I think there's something genuinely powerful about choosing one thing and going all in.
All right, make your case. I'm listening.
Think about anyone you genuinely admire for a skill. A musician, a chef, a photographer. They didn't get there by dabbling in 12 different things. They picked one lane and stayed in it, even when it got uncomfortable.
So you're saying the discomfort is actually the point?
Exactly, because here's what most people don't talk about. There's a stage in learning anything where you hit a plateau. You've got the basics down, but you're not improving anymore. Everything feels flat, and that's the exact moment most people quit and go find something new.
Oh, that's so real. That's the pottery class moment. Week 4, you've made a few lopsided bowls, and suddenly the excitement is just gone.
Right, but if you push through that plateau, if you actually stay with it, that's when the real breakthroughs happen. That's when you go from making lopsided bowls to making something you're actually proud of.
Okay, but here's my question. What if the plateau isn't a sign to push through? What if it's a sign that this particular thing just isn't for you?
That's a fair question, but I think people use that logic to escape commitment way too early. The plateau feels like a dead end, but it's actually a doorway. You just have to be willing to walk through it.
So you're saying most people confuse this is hard with this isn't right for me.
Completely. And the people who stick with something long enough, they're not necessarily more talented. They're just more willing to sit with the discomfort a little longer than everyone else.
Okay, I want to push back on something here. Because you're making it sound like switching hobbies is just weakness. Like if you're restless, there's something wrong with you.
I didn't say that.
You kind of implied it. Stay in one lane. Push through. That's a very specific personality type you're describing.
Fair. Maybe I'm projecting a little. I've always been someone who goes deep on things. I dabble in almost nothing. I either go all in or I don't start.
Which is its own kind of problem, honestly. You've never just tried something for fun without turning it into a whole project?
I once spent 3 months learning to make sourdough bread. I built a spreadsheet for fermentation time.
See, that's what I mean. Not everyone wants that level of commitment. Some people just want to enjoy things without it becoming a second job.
That's actually a really good point. There's a difference between commitment as dedication and commitment as pressure.
And I think a lot of people who feel restless aren't lazy or unfocused. They're just wired to find energy in novelty. Every new hobby is a little hit of excitement, a new world to explore.
But doesn't that mean you never actually get good at anything? You're always a beginner, always in that early honeymoon phase.
Maybe. Or maybe you're building a different kind of intelligence. The ability to learn quickly, adapt, connect ideas across different fields. There's real value in that too.
Okay, I'll grant you that. But here's what I keep coming back to. When you dabble in something and then move on, do you actually remember it? Does it stay with you?
That's a harder question. And honestly, it connects to something we want to get into in the next part of this episode, because there's a psychological concept that explains why some experiences stick with us and others just fade.
And by the way, there's a phrase for that feeling when you're deep into something and suddenly everything clicks. We'll break it down in our word tour later.
But first, let's talk about the other side of this argument, because I have some thoughts. Okay, my turn, because I think the whole pick one thing and master it narrative is missing the whole picture.
Here we go.
I'm serious. We live in a world that constantly tells people, especially adults, that if you're not specializing, you're wasting your time. But I genuinely disagree with that framing. Being restless isn't a character flaw, it might actually be a feature.
A feature? That's a stretch. How is constantly abandoning things a feature?
Because exploration builds something that deep specialization often does in adaptability. When you dabble in photography, then cooking, then coding, you're not just collecting hobbies. You're training your brain to enter unfamiliar territory without panicking. That's a genuinely useful skill.
Okay, I'll give you that adaptability point, but here's where I don't buy others. A difference between exploring intentionally and just being unable to stick with something because discomfort kicks in. Most hobby switchers aren't making a strategic choice. They're just escaping the plateau.
I have to disagree. You're assuming the motivation is always avoidance. But what if someone genuinely gets what they need from a hobby in 3 months? What if the goal was never mastery? It was just joy, or curiosity, or stress relief.
That's fair. But then why do those same people feel guilty about it? You said it yourself in Act 1. There's that quiet voice asking, why can't I just commit? If exploration is so healthy, why does it feel like failure?
Because we've been conditioned to measure value by output, by the performance at the cafe, by the 500-day streak, by the finished product, and if you don't have that, society tells you that you wasted your time.
So your argument is that society is wrong and the hobby switcher is actually fine?
My argument is that the guilt isn't evidence of a problem. It's evidence of a mismatch between what someone values and what they've been told they should value.
But here's my real pushback, Aria. Let's talk about the peak end rule. This is a concept from psychology, developed by Daniel Kahneman. It says that people don't remember experiences based on the average of how they felt throughout. They remember the peak moment, the highest emotional point, and the ending.
Okay, that's interesting. So how does that connect to hobbies?
Think about it. If you stick with something long enough, you get 2 powerful memories. The breakthrough moment when you finally nail something hard, and the satisfaction of actually finishing or mastering it. Those are deep, lasting peaks. But if you keep switching, your peaks are always just the novelty high at the beginning, and novelty fades fast.
That's actually a strong point, but I'd push back on the ending part. You're assuming that quitting a hobby is a bad ending. What if someone leaves a hobby feeling genuinely satisfied? I tried it, I enjoyed it, I'm done. That's still a positive ending by the peak end rule.
I hadn't thought about it that way.
And here's something else. The peak end rule also explains why people who dabble in things aren't necessarily left with empty memories. Every new hobby has its own peak. The first time you throw a pot that doesn't collapse, the first photo you take that actually looks good, those moments are real, even if you don't continue.
Okay, so you're saying both paths can produce meaningful peaks. It's not mastery versus exploration. It's about whether you're actually present enough to notice the peak when it happens.
Exactly. And that's where commitment comes back in, not as stay forever, but as be fully here while you're here, whether that's 3 months or 3 years.
So the real problem isn't switching hobbies. The real problem is going through the motions without ever actually engaging deeply enough to hit a peak at all.
Right. The person who tries pottery for 6 weeks and genuinely loves every session that's different from the person who shows up distracted, waiting to feel excited, and quits when the excitement doesn't come automatically.
But I still think there's something lost when you never push past the plateau. Because the peaks that come after the plateau, those are a different level entirely. That's the guitarist performing at the cafe. That's not available to someone who switches every few months.
I don't disagree. Those peaks are deeper. But they're not the only peaks worth having. And not everyone is chasing the same thing from a hobby.
So maybe the real question isn't master one or try many. It's what kind of peak are you actually looking for?
And being honest with yourself about that answer, that's where it all starts. Okay, we've argued both sides pretty hard today. Mastery, exploration, plateaus, peaks.
And we used some really good words along the way. Words that are genuinely useful for talking about this stuff in English.
Which means it's time for our word tour. 5 expressions from today's conversation.
Let's break them down, one by one.
So the first one we kept coming back to today was stick with something. And it sounds simple, but it carries a lot of weight.
Right. It doesn't just mean continue doing something. It means staying with it even when it gets hard, even when the excitement is gone. There's a persistence quality to it.
So you wouldn't say, I stuck with something for one afternoon. The phrase implies real time, real effort. Like, she stuck with piano for 6 years and finally performed in public.
Or, the more painful version, I couldn't stick with anything for more than a month. Which, honestly, is a sentence a lot of people have said about themselves.
And there's no judgment in the phrase itself. It's just describing a pattern. He's someone who sticks with things. That tells you a lot about a person.
Now, the opposite energy is our next word dabble in. And this one's actually kind of charming.
It really is. To dabble in something means to try it casually, without serious commitment. You're dipping a toe in, not jumping into the deep end.
I dabble in watercolor painting. That sentence immediately tells you this person does it for fun. They're not trying to go professional, and they're probably okay with being bad at it.
Which is actually a lovely way to exist in a hobby. Not everything needs to be serious. I've dabbled in a few languages over the years. You get the picture. Some stuck, some didn't.
And dabbling is often how you figure out what you actually want to stick with. They work together in a way.
Which brings us perfectly to plateau. We talked about this one a lot today. A plateau is that stage where you've learned the basics, but your progress just stops. Everything feels flat.
And it's genuinely frustrating because you're still putting in the effort. You're showing up, but the results aren't moving. It's like running on a treadmill that's secretly turned off.
That's such a good image, and the word works both as a noun and a verb. I hit a plateau, or my progress has plateaued. Both completely natural.
And the plateau is almost always the moment that tests your commitment, which is our next word and probably the most emotionally loaded one of the 5.
Commitment means a genuine, sustained dedication to something. Not just showing up once, but making a real promise to yourself that you'll keep going. His commitment to learning guitar never wavered, even after 2 frustrating years.
And commitment isn't just about hobbies. She showed real commitment to the project. They've made a commitment to each other. It works across relationships, work, goals, anywhere that staying power matters.
The tricky thing about commitment is that it can feel like pressure, like you're locking yourself in. But really, it's just choosing something on purpose, repeatedly.
Which is the opposite feeling of our last word, restless. And this one I find really expressive.
Restless means you can't settle. There's this underlying energy, this need for something new or different. She felt restless after 6 months in the same routine. You can feel it just reading the sentence.
It's not quite boredom, and it's not quite anxiety. It's somewhere in between. That itch for change. He gets restless whenever things stay the same for too long.
And restlessness isn't always negative. Sometimes it's the thing that pushes you towards something genuinely better. But when it shows up every time a hobby gets difficult, that's worth noticing.
So to recap the 5 stick with something: dabble in, plateau, commitment, restless. All 5 are perfect for talking about learning, growth, habits, and honestly, just understanding yourself a little better.
And they all showed up naturally today because they're the real words people use when they talk about this stuff. That's the whole point. So here's where we landed today. There's no universally right answer between mastering one thing and exploring many. But there is a more honest question you can ask yourself.
What kind of peak are you actually chasing? The deep, hard-won satisfaction of pushing past the plateau and coming out the other side? Or the genuine joy of discovery, that fresh excitement every time you dabble in something new?
And your answer makes you broken, but being unclear about it, that's where the guilt creeps in. That's where you end up feeling restless without knowing why.
So here's something practical. Next time you feel like quitting a hobby, pause for just a second and ask, am I leaving because this genuinely isn't for me? Or am I leaving because I just hit a plateau and it got uncomfortable?
That when question can change everything, because if it's the plateau, you might be 3 weeks away from the breakthrough that makes it all worth it.
And if it's genuinely not for you, then leave without guilt. You explored it. You got something from it. That's not failure. That's just how learning works sometimes.
The second thing we'd say is this. Don't confuse commitment with rigidity. Committing to something doesn't mean you can never change your mind. It just means you give it a real, honest chance before you walk away.
3 months of genuine effort is a real chance. 3 sessions before it gets hard? Probably isn't.
Before you go, we want to hear from you. Tell us in the comments, are you a master one thing person or a try everything person? And has that ever caused you any guilt?
We read every single comment. Seriously, everyone. Thanks for spending this time with us, and we'll see you in the next episode.
Bye for now, and go stick with something today, even just for 20 minutes.